ICON is a project which has surprisingly unique advantages that no other project has. Adoption by government, a compelling interoperability solution, and it's one of the most decentralized communities of developers I have personally come across. At the moment, it is going through a complete tech and governance upgrade to ICON 2.0, so it has some short-term upside potential as well. It also has all the necessary parts to grow into one of the most important blockchains in the world, in one of the hardest markets to get into. So in this video, I'll share with you in simple words everything you need to know about ICON. At the end, I will summarize and give it a rating, and information in this video should still be valid after the ICON 2.0 release. Standard disclaimer, this video is for educational purposes only. This is not financial advice, so please do your own research and consult a professional before looking to make any investment. So, the vision of ICON is to be a super network of networks, connecting different communities and individuals through blockchain. Just like how a country is a collection of communities and individuals with roads that connect them. Some of the ICON team frequently refer to the idea of a digital nation, and at one point, ICON even had its own constitution. I'm not sure if this is where ICON got its name, but self-contribution is a key theme throughout the project. But the easiest way to think about ICON is to think of ginger. Yes, ginger. I know it sounds weird, but ginger has a special part called a rhizome. A rhizome has no central point and can grow in all directions. Each part of the rhizome contributes to the overall health of the ginger plant. Now, the term ginger was coined by ICON themselves. I really wish I could take credit for it. So just like a rhizome, ICON is growing in all directions to connect different blockchains by becoming an interoperable network. They call themselves the aggregator chain. Now, interoperability is an extremely useful feature, and if you don't know what interoperability is, it is the ability for different hardware and software to exchange information freely. One example would be being able to write on a piece of paper, scanning that piece of paper onto your computer, and then sending it as an email to someone who will open it on their smartphone. So that's one example, but specifically, interoperability in crypto is the ability for different blockchains, DLTs, and legacy databases to exchange and use information freely. And at the moment, this is hard to do, as each blockchain can have different structures, algorithms, and semantics. You see, you need to actually understand in depth how each of them work, and then build custom mechanisms from scratch to connect each one. This takes a lot of time and money. So most of crypto today is siloed, and blockchains do not actually communicate with each other. Take this for example, what if you needed to build a health insurance dApp which connects XRP for payments, Algo for smart contracts, and legacy databases for patient records? What about if you also wanted to use Filecoin for decentralized storage? So you see, this is hard to do, and why you see that most apps today are simple things like gaming or gambling and are built on only one, maybe maximum two blockchains. So to see some real world mass adoption, like real adoption, not just us crypto nerds, dApps need to be far more complex. Things like CBDCs, supply chains, decentralized health, and identity are only possible with interoperability. So, interoperability is extremely useful and is a part of the market you definitely should be paying attention to. Now, ICON is aiming to connect all the blockchains by being the aggregator chain, or the chain you connect to connect other chains. Now, for those of you that have watched my Quant and interoperability tier list video, you may be thinking, so what? Quant can already do this and more. Plus, there are other interoperability projects like Chainlink, CCIP, Interledger, and Polkadot. What makes ICON really stand out against these competitors? Well, ICON's interoperability solution is called BTP, or Blockchain Transmission Protocol. BTP is basically a pre-built protocol for cross-chain communication. The keyword here being pre-built. You see, building dApps is hard even with one blockchain. Now imagine you tell a developer you have to learn about another blockchain and connect both together. What this means is that developers are spending more time on figuring all this out instead of actually focusing on building their dApps features. So, the easier the solution to implement, the more likely it is to be used. This is where pre-built gives ICON an edge. Think of it kind of like a template that other developers can reuse. For example, BTP is currently being implemented on Polkadot and Ethereum. Then,
anyone else who wants to interoperate with Polkadot and Ethereum via Icon can simply reuse that same implementation.
If BTP is not already implemented, then Icon provides standardized BTP interfaces which make it easier to implement than doing it from scratch. This puts Icon's BTP above Cosmos, Polkadot, and other blockchain of blockchains in terms of ease of use. You can think of it being similar to Chainlink's CCIP, which is also essentially a pre-built architecture. The Icon team has basically done all the heavy lifting, but is it better than other interoperability solutions though?
BTP's key differentiator is that it is a trustless mechanism using relayers.
This makes Icon a more decentralized option compared to both Chainlink CCIP and Quant Overledger. The network can verify and enforce cross-chain transfers itself just by using pure cryptography and smart contracts. This means you don't have to trust anyone, meaning it is a more decentralized option. So, developers who prioritize decentralization might prefer using Icon. But what about Quant, you ask? Well, with Quant, if you run your own nodes in the blockchains you're connecting, then you are in full control. But if you use a remote gateway operator on Overledger, then those remote gateways essentially act as intermediaries. The third feature of BTP is that it allows for smart contract interoperability. This feature is what makes complex dApps actually possible, and most of the other interoperability solutions today like notary schemes and hash time lock contracts only deal with simple asset transfers. Now, legacy system interoperability is also theoretically possible with Icon. Most databases and systems today are still obviously non-blockchain based systems, so it's important that dApps are able to integrate with them. But I say theoretically because it is not actually made clear by Icon. Plus, there could be security and legal issues involved when connecting a public blockchain to a legacy system.
Another thing that comes into question is technology lock-in. And what I mean by this is, let's say for example you spend $10 million on building a dApp on Algo, and one day you find out that maybe Sol is actually more appropriate for your dApp. How are you going to move your dApp from Algo to Sol? It's probably going to be a headache migrating everything over. So Icon doesn't seem to have any migration capabilities, therefore it cannot fulfill this use case. Scalability of Icon is also a big question here. With interoperability, we're talking about being able to handle transfers from multiple networks globally. If Icon cannot fulfill this with an acceptable speed and cost, then it's hard to see developers using it. But before we talk about actual speeds, Icon has a multi-channel architecture. So this means each dApp and smart contract can run in parallel to each other and are not tied down to the block creation process. This means that whatever the speed Icon is capable of, each score and dApp run at the speed without slowing each other down. This is a way of achieving scalability called horizontal scaling, and you can think of it being similar to having an 8-core processor instead of a 1-core. This same concept applies to the BTP relays. You see, BTP relays are for BTP, and nodes are for Icon's consensus mechanism. They handle completely separate tasks, and since relays are trustless, you theoretically could have a single relay bridge all the interoperating transactions. Running a relay is also easier than running a full node. They are similar in that you need certain hardware requirements, but any individual can set up a relay and start earning fees. The yields and requirements on running a relay are not known yet though. But the idea is that since running a relay is easier than running a full node, concerns about scalability would go down as more people look to set up relays. This could be one way of handling global volume comfortably as Icon scales horizontally. This differentiates Icon from the other interoperability solutions like Quant and Chainlink, where full nodes are needed. The average Joe investor might actually set up a relay purely because they can. Also, Icon is currently undergoing a tech architecture upgrade to Icon 2.0. The entire project is being rewritten in Golang instead of Python. And Golang is a more stable and scalable architecture, so any speeds we talk about now are subject to change. Now, with that out of the way, the actual transaction speed of Icon is over 9,000 transactions per second. This means that each smart contract, dApp, and the Icon block creation process itself has capability to do over 9,000 transactions per second concurrently. Now, what does this mean for transaction speeds globally? Well, it's hard to say, but to give you some perspective, Visa does around 1,700 transactions per second globally, and Google does about 63,000 searches per second. And Quant Overledger speeds are based off off-chain layer 2 payment channel speeds, so this is bound by the speed of the internet itself. So we can say that Icon falls somewhere in the middle, but can it handle global volumes though? It's hard to say, and blockchain will handle more than just payments. Everything could be tokenized, so a speed near Google is a somewhat good reference to aim for. Plus the fact that Icon is bridging networks can be seen as an extra step. But let's not give any judgment here. We don't actually know how fast an interoperability solution should be. Sure, we can always say faster is better, but ultimately, it will come down to which solutions are developers more likely to use in their particular situation. The only thing we can say for certain now is that Icon's BTP beats most solutions and is a more decentralized option compared to its competitors. There could be a scenario where public developers who work independently or in small companies might appreciate decentralization more. And on the other side, I'm sure private developers who work for enterprise and value low risk, high security would probably appreciate something more like Quant Overledger. But for now, let's continue with a quick demo of a simple asset transfer on BTP, which will show how relayers and the ICX token is used. So let's say a dApp has some function which connects ICX and Algo somehow and is using BTP. Alice wants to use this function and has to send 100 ICX to Algo for whatever reason. So this transfer must go from ICX to Algo. And by the way, it can also go Algo to ICX. The same following steps apply. So first, the 100 ICX will be sent to a BTP service contract score. Remember, score are smart contracts on Icon and they all run in parallel to each other. The service contract score will have application-specific logic set up by the developer, so it's customizable. The dApp developer can actually choose to charge the end user in crypto or in a fixed fiat amount. So what happens next is 99 out of the 100 ICX are locked. Why 99? Well, this is where the BTP fee is deducted. The minimum BTP network fee is 0.2% of the transfer, and of course developers can also add their own fee on top for using their dApp. The network fee is charged in whatever is being sent. So for example, if this transfer was going the other way around, which is a transfer going from Algo to ICX, then the fee deducted would be 0.2% of the Algo being transferred. In this case, it is ICX, so one ICX is taken as a fee and sent to the fee aggregation score. We will get back to the fee aggregation score in more detail later because it actually ties into the economic system of Icon, which is actually pretty cool. Now the remaining 99 ICX is locked on Icon, and the service contract score sends a BTP message to the message center score on Icon. The message center score aggregates all BTP messages. Then a relayer at regular intervals reads this BTP message about the 99 ICX and sends a BTP message to the message center smart contract on Algo. The message center on Algo is not a score. Score only applies to smart contracts on Icon. Then something called a verifier contract on Algo verifies this BTP message automatically using something called SPV proofs. SPV proofs is how the whole process can actually function trustlessly, and it either approves or rejects the message. Now, assuming the message is approved, the message center will forward the approved message to the service contract on Algo. This service contract will then mint 99 wrapped ICX, ready to use for whatever the intended function was. Now, before diving into the economic system, let's quickly go through Icon's consensus mechanism. And since Icon is a blockchain in itself, we need to be aware of this for projects based on Icon. Icon's own unique consensus mechanism is called Loop Fault Tolerance 2.0, or LFT2, which is a BFT-based algorithm. Now forget the fancy words here, just know that normally in a BFT-based algorithm, there are 3 phases of votes to create a new block. In LFT2, there are only 2 phases, which makes LFT2 inherently faster than a normal BFT-based algorithm. The trade-off though is that it loses a little decentralization in order to get more speed. But LFT2 can still work efficiently with as much as 1/3 of all nodes being malicious, with maybe some minor delays to block production. By the way, 1/3 is the standard for most BFT-based algorithms, which includes projects like Algo and Cosmos. Now, I'm not saying Icon will be strictly faster than these projects. It depends on a lot of other factors, but just know that in general, it's pretty scalable, and the Icon core dev team knows a thing or two about upgrading consensus mechanisms. Now, Icon also uses delegated proof of contribution, which helps protect against centralization issues related with a normal delegated proof of stake mechanism. You see, most holders don't give a crap about which nodes will do a better job. They just want to earn their staking rewards, so most of the time they just delegate their stake to the node with the most delegated stake already. This is where delegated proof of contribution comes in. Depop promotes decentralization by shifting the incentive of running nodes to running specific projects and dApps. Projects can be anything from promoting Icon to developing to running a new DeFi dApp. And it does this a couple ways. First off, at any given point in time, there are 100 nodes or PREPs participating in block creation. Now there can be more than 100, but only the top 100 in terms of delegated stake can participate. Out of that 100, only the top 22 PREPs actually get to create the blocks, while the rest remain on standby. The standby PREPs have a random chance to take part in the top 22, with 3 PREP slots rotating out every day. Now, if you are one of the top 22, then you don't get any extra reward for block production. You earn the same amount of rewards as the top 100 PREPs, simply for being on standby. So there is less incentive to get up higher in the top 100, as the rewards are the same anyway. And there's less incentive to run multiple nodes under one PREP in order to produce a block, as there's no extra reward for doing it. Now, of course, PREPs below the top 100 can still bribe ICX holders and earn more rewards by getting into the top 100, but all PREPs need to lock up 5% of the amount delegated to them as a bond. So there's less incentive to gather votes, as the more votes PREPs receive, the higher the bond they have to post. Now, if a PREP acts poorly, like failing to validate blocks or is offline a lot of the time, then they can either be kicked out of block production or get their bond burnt. And by the way, this is all governed on-chain. So there are various safeguards against centralization, but is it enough though? We can't be sure really. The only thing we know is that Icon has been online since 2017, and nothing like cartelization has happened. At the end of the day, it is the other 2/3 of the network which should remain vigilant. It comes down to people actually taking responsibility and checking each other to do the right thing, just like any other democracy. The important thing though is that the code and the network incentivizes active participation instead of ignorance. Which brings us to the economic system of Icon. We will now go through the fee aggregation score mentioned earlier. Now, BTP charges fees which are sent to the fee aggregation score. The fees collected here are charged in whatever the asset was transferred. So in the fee aggregation score, there can be a whole collection of various assets. These fees are then moved from the fee aggregator to an auction where they are sold. The auction sells these assets at a 10% discount to market rate, priced in ICX. Now, there are various implications around bots and only whales winning the auction, but the main idea here is that it gives additional demand to ICX tokens. Now, these ICX sales from the auction will then be put into something called the Contribution Proposal Fund, or CPF. The CPF is a decentralized governance fund for Icon, and it is how Icon incentivizes ICX holders to participate and further disincentivizes centralization. It shifts emphasis away from block creation to actual projects being built. Now the cool thing is, anyone, including you, can go to the Contribution Proposal System forum, make a proposal to the community, and receive monthly funding for it from the CPF, all done on-chain. Proposals only turn into projects by getting voted in by PREPs, and PREPs are incentivized to get involved with proposals because there are extra rewards for managing the CPF. ICX holders are then also incentivized to vote for PREPs who do this because there are extra rewards and diminishing returns from just purely working on running a node. This benefits the entire ecosystem by funding projects which actually grow the network. Now, obviously, not everyone who submits a proposal will receive funding. P-reps need to actually post 10% of the proposal's budget with their own ICX and vouch for the proposal. Proposals and bonded P-reps need to secure votes from the other P-reps, where more than 2/3 of the vote results in an approved proposal. So you see, this creates an environment of active participation where P-reps and ICX holders do their due diligence. The whole theme of contribution seems to be very apparent in the ICON community, and it is kind of growing and evolving organically. Now, the next part of the economic system is the ICON Incentives Scoring System, or the IISS. The IISS has gone through several iterations, but the idea behind it is to find the best incentive model to support long-term economic growth of the network. It keeps track of several variables, and each day something called I-score is distributed to 4 main buckets based on those variables. This I-score is actually redeemable for ICX from the ICON treasury at a rate of 1000 I-score for 1 ICX. And this is how all ICX holders, P-reps, relayers, and CPF projects actually receive their rewards. This I-score can also be viewed transparently by all parties in the network, and governance votes can be proposed to change variables, shift incentives, and grow the network as the community sees fit. So for example, if there's a low amount of relayers, then a network vote can be proposed to increase the reward rate for relayers. Or if there is a low amount of P-reps vouching and bonding with CPF proposals, then the CPF rates can be increased, incentivizing both CPF proposers and P-reps to get involved. Now, in previous iterations of the IISS, there were talks of using AI and Gini coefficients. This is a pretty cool idea and would have been nice to see, especially Gini coefficients. However, the ICON network is still growing and such a complex system is not necessary at the moment. So this newest iteration of IISS has been simplified, but the main takeaway here is that the IISS allows ICX holders to see transparently the rewards of each other and make votes on changing those rewards, all governed on-chain. By the way, on-chain means that all changes are tracked and verified on the blockchain. So once a change is voted on, those changes are programmatically enforced on all ICX holders by the network itself. But why not just distribute ICX directly instead of I-score? And where does this redeemable ICX come from? Well, this brings us to the tokenomics of ICON. Let's first go through the supply side. Currently, the supply of ICON is roughly 905 million, and it doesn't have a maximum supply. Now, I'm going to use a scary word here, but don't be afraid. ICON uses an inflationary model. Now, I know what you're thinking. Inflationary? Really? I thought the whole point of crypto was to get away from inflation. Let me stop you right there. Several projects actually use an inflationary model, and inflation isn't always bad. Just a little inflation is good for economic growth. If there was no inflation and only deflation, then why would you ever spend your money? Why not just hold on to it, as you know its value is increasing every day? The economy basically slows down, as no one is spending on anything. So, the ICON treasury gets minted with ICX based on I-score distributions and also inflation targets. The maximum inflation rate that can occur is 3.99%, and this inflation refills those 4 buckets in the ICON treasury based on those variables we talked about earlier. So for example, the ICON treasury collects transaction fees from normal ICX transactions on the network. To match these transaction fees, I-score is calculated and distributed to all staking ICX holders and top 100 P-reps. Now that I-score is redeemable for the ICX in the ICON treasury, which either has been minted through inflation or collected as fees. If the fees collected are below the maximum inflation rate, then the remainder is minted as new ICX. So if you think about it, your ICX staking rewards are basically guaranteed through inflation. Now, if the fees collected are above the maximum inflation rate, then the excess ICX is burnt. Similarly, the BTP fees which are fed into the CPF are also burnt, as the CPF has a 1 million ICX cap. So, to summarize, ICON's inflation can be lowered or even become deflationary depending on the activity on the network. The higher the activity, the less ICX gets inflated. If there was no network activity, then maximum inflation would occur, which would encourage more spending activity. If ICX holders leave the network because of this inflation, then reward rates for staking goes up, encouraging new ICX holders to join the network. Now, there are a couple more ways the circulating supply can also decrease. Obviously, you can also stake ICX tokens, and currently 50% of the network is staking. You can stake ICX to get a 4.1% real yield, and staking can be done with any amount of ICX. And by the way, regarding the other 50% who aren't staking, in Icon 2.0 they're releasing something which automatically stakes the unstaked ICX. This would probably result in a huge upswing in price and is happening sometime this year. Now that concludes the supply side for Icon. Now let's look through the demand side. First, there's obviously demand from being able to stake ICX, which would attract yield-seeking investors. Next is the BTP auctions. ICX tokens will be sought after as a way to purchase other assets at a 10% discount. This is pretty unique in the space, and seasoned arbitrageurs will probably be pretty interested in this. Next is BTP itself. Interoperability is highly useful, and BTP would stand out for developers who value trustless interoperability. Also, there is a certain network effect here. The more BTP is implemented amongst other chains, it gives more incentive to go through the Icon network. Or better yet, why not just base your dApp on Icon? This also results in a positive feedback loop, where more fees makes real yields more attractive, attracting more demand from staking, driving up the price. Now, everything I've told you up until now sounds pretty good, and Icon is definitely a contender with BTP and Icon 2.0, at least a top 3 project in terms of interoperability. But to see some real demand for ICX, Icon needs to solve a real life problem. And this next thing is what gives Icon the potential to be one of the most important blockchains in existence. Icon is solving a problem in one of the biggest markets in the world, if not the biggest, and everyone in crypto is sleeping on it: decentralized identity. Now, CBDCs, DeFi, supply chains, yeah, sure, they are big, but I mean every single person on Earth has an identity. But what is the problem with identity? Well, you use your identity for various things in your life. Things like opening a bank account, taking out loans, and buying stuff online. The point is, each time you use your identity, various organizations who hold a copy of your identity have to cross-check it against each other. For example, when you buy something online, the payment processor has to verify your bank details with your bank. The bank has to then verify that you actually want to buy something. And then the company you are buying from has to work with a fraud detection agency to trust that you are actually the real person. All of this adds time and cost. This also means each organization involved has a copy of your information and is liable for any data breaches. This is what decentralized identity solves. By storing personal and sensitive information on the blockchain, each organization doesn't have to keep a copy or share your details anymore. They can simply make a request to the public blockchain. Now, in South Korea, the birthplace of Icon, there's something called the MyID Alliance. The MyID Alliance is formed of 86 large institutions. This alliance was initially started by the government, instructing the Financial Services Commission to look into using blockchain. The alliance was then led by the Korean Financial Investment Association and has grown into what it is today. Now, this would be equivalent to the US government telling the SEC to look into promoting blockchain, and then all the mega banks like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and more all getting together to develop a project. Imagine that. Now, the aim of MyID is to use the Icon blockchain to issue, store, and verify the institution's user data. The idea is that user data is stored on a public version of Icon, and the institution's data will be stored on a private version of Icon. Then, BTP will be used to do cross-chain interoperability between the public and private versions. Now, as you can imagine, with large institutions involved, this is a slow process. The institutions involved are actually migrating their legacy databases into a private version of Icon. Though I don't think this means legacy system interoperability is not possible with Icon. I think this is more of a sign of the progressive attitude towards technology in South Korea. And It's just even more impressive for ICON that these institutions are willing to migrate to the ICON blockchain. It's important to note here that the private versions do not use ICX. Of course, it would be better for ICX holders if it did, but the use of tokens is not really necessary for internal processes in enterprise. It just shows that ICON listens to the enterprise customers. Now, there is an actual working dApp already being used called Zung. Zung is a dApp built on the public ICON blockchain, and its current use cases are storing and verifying student diplomas, driver's licenses, bank KYC, and visitor management. In fact, it is mandatory to download the Zung app to use for contact tracing when visiting Jeju Island, which has about 15 million visitors per year. Now, before we continue, let me stress something here. Decentralized identity is hard to do, not because of blockchain, but because you're dealing with personal identities. This is sensitive information and you need to work with government regulations. Working with government is notoriously slow, and passing regulations to make use of blockchain in identity takes time. And gaining trust as a new disruptive technology from the government is no easy task. So just think about this now. The government was happy to use ICON for contact tracing. It may only be an island, but the point is, if the government was happy to use it then, they may also be happy to use it for other things. This gives ICON a massive competitive edge in the decentralized identity space. So, with the current use case for Zung, we can say there is consistent demand generated for ICON. Whenever someone visits Jeju Island, a transaction occurs on the ICON network. And don't forget the other use cases as well. These are things that occur at a fixed rate every year and probably do not change wildly from year to year. But what does this mean for price though? We all want to invest in something that shoots up high, but what about something with steady demand that can possibly hold its price steadily through ups and downs in the market? Perhaps it can be seen as a store of value. It's really hard to quantify this at the moment, and what about all the other identity-related use cases like voting, credit ratings, and healthcare? If ICON can capture these markets, the upside here is pretty significant. And surprisingly, the chances of this happening all on ICON is actually pretty decent. And it is all because of the country ICON was born in, South Korea. South Korea is an amazing country for several reasons, but one of the things that stands out is its rapid economic growth. You see, Korea used to be part of the Japanese Empire, and after World War II, Japan surrendered their control. Shortly after, the US and the Soviet Union occupied Korea, effectively splitting the country into two regimes. And it was only until later, during the Fourth Republic of South Korea, that the government began backing the electronics and steel manufacturing industries, which helped set them on a path of rapid growth. So the country has gone through its fair share of conflict and rebuilding, not to mention they are virtually sandwiched in between their rivals China, North Korea, and historical enemy Japan, which adds a level of psychological pressure. And even though they have done very well coming out of it, it's not hard to imagine most South Koreans have a relative who remembers these times and reminds the younger generation of their hardship and how they must work hard and represent their country. And you can see this has clearly manifested. South Korean brands are often purchased over international brands. South Korean ideals of beauty, food, and culture have spread throughout the world, and South Koreans themselves are amongst the most educated and highest achieving citizens in the world. But South Korea today is facing a new challenge. They have the fastest aging population, even faster than Japan. As the working age population falls, it puts a huge drag on growth, with less working age Koreans supporting more senior Koreans in retirement. South Korea needs to find new ways to boost productivity with an ever-shrinking workforce. And this is exactly what they are doing. South Korea has made a number of regulatory reforms which really put it at the forefront of digitalization and technology once again. Now, one of the reforms we are really interested in is the changes passed in the Data 3 Act. This change actually permits the usage and sharing of personal data by enterprise without consent. But the catch is, enterprise can use and share your personal data as long as it is pseudonymized. Pseudonymized data is data that has been processed in such a way that it can no longer identify or be traced back to a specific person in any way. Now, what is one way of pseudonymizing data? Blockchain. This is a subtle yet profound change. This means that enterprises have the green light to share and combine their datasets across multiple industries to analyze customer behavior, engagement, financials, and even granular data that you probably didn't think even existed, like how many times you opened your smart fridge last night. This allows enterprises to gain insight and be more efficient in the way they create and sell products. More efficiency means more productivity with less, which is what South Korea needs. This means those institutions in the MyID Alliance can now freely share their datasets across the ICON blockchain. Now, this does sound a little creepy and Big Brotherish, but there is another side to this change, which is equally as profound: the right to data portability. South Koreans actually have the right to store their own data with any provider of their choosing, taking responsibility for their own personal data. Private companies can now offer personal data and identity storage services, and digital identities are given the same weight as traditional identification documents. This is the first step towards a new market where South Korean citizens have the power to sell their own data if they choose to. So as it stands, ICON is in a country with a government that is pro-blockchain, pro-digital identity, pro-cybersecurity, and is being used in an alliance of 86 of the most powerful organizations in the country. South Koreans are also very receptive to new technology, and they're very comfortable with their smartphones. They are also more likely to opt in to a decentralized identity if they stand to earn money. They may also see it as the right thing to do, as the country faces cyber invaders from their neighbors. It really is no surprise that there's a high level of investment in these types of identity projects. So you see, South Korea is the perfect launchpad for a decentralized identity project. But sure, it's great if ICON can capture South Korea, but what about globally? We all face the same problem around the world, with large enterprise handling our data, eventually leading us to question why we are fending off telemarketers multiple times a day. It's not hard to imagine this technology is allowed to mature and be perfected in South Korea before being exported globally. Not an unfamiliar story, and is usually the route many startups take today. The EU seems to be open to the idea, and most recently, COVID passports in Italy does seem like we are heading down that path. But I'm not going to claim I can predict the future. Other countries need to catch up with regulatory reforms like South Korea, and even if they do, I'm not sure they will all use ICON. Unless ICON Loop, the ICON dev company based in South Korea, sets up offices around the world and gets behind the language barrier. This is at least a decade-long mission to go global with MyID. And there are also usability concerns around decentralized identity. Things like people forgetting their passwords to their wallets, and also how can they get this to work completely offline? The solution is just not fully ready yet. Plus, in South Korea, there are also other blockchain projects competing in the space. The days of chaebol are over, and South Korea actually encourages competition in the market, as at the end of the day it means more growth. At the moment though, each project seems to be fulfilling a different purpose. However, what sets ICON apart is BTP. ICON was also born of strong fundamentals. It didn't start in the usual way most blockchains do, where people just come together, write a white paper, and raise money through an ICO. ICON's parent company was Daily Financial, one of the largest fintechs in Asia. Daily saw opportunities working with clients back in the day, and they invested in AI and blockchain. Then out popped two companies, DaVinci Labs and The Loop. The Loop worked with enterprise financial companies, building private blockchain solutions. Out of this, a couple of the partners realized that eventually this would lead to a blockchain world, where most companies would use private blockchains internally. But there was nothing connecting these blockchains. To truly unlock the power of blockchain, they had the vision to launch ICON, and The Loop rebranded to ICON Loop. The original founders of ICON then broke off into the ICON Foundation based in Switzerland, which is now a decentralized collection of teams across the world. So you see, ICON's birth is based on solid fundamentals. They actually sought out to solve problems for financial companies instead of just raising an ICO. This is what gives ICON its deep roots. It has good relations with government and enterprise in South Korea. It has a really impressive web of partnerships. Some other notable partnerships are Round Secure. They're working with ICON Loop to build the world's first FIDO system using blockchain. Round Secure is a leader in online authentication and is the founder of the FIDO Alliance and also part of the DID Alliance. These are two massive alliances that ICON is one step of separation away from. Kyobo Life, a health insurance company, and also the Precision Medical Hospital Information System, which is a health consortium of major hospitals in South Korea. They plan to use blockchain to enable sharing of patient health datasets across the country, allowing them to gain insight and offer customized and extremely precise healthcare. And in terms of Kyobo Life, the shared datasets will allow them to create new disease prediction services and offer more competitive insurance rates. This seems to play along with the same theme of sharing pseudonymized user data for boosting efficiency. The incentive for enterprise to use the public ICON blockchain is the power of shared datasets. The more and more enterprise get onto the private version, the more value they can get from interoperating with the public version. In the month I spent researching ICON, their community members have been so helpful, and I really get a sense that each one is actually contributing something useful to the ICON network. If you're looking to join a community where you can actually make a difference, you should definitely have a look at ICON, especially if you're a developer. Make a good proposal and you can potentially receive funding for it. Which brings me to my next point, which is how decentralized ICON's governance is. You may see all these new ICON DeFi projects being announced recently. These aren't from the ICON Foundation team. These are literally from the ICON community itself. Now, let's have a look at the original ICON Foundation team. They all have degrees from top universities and have experience working in tech, but the core advantage they have is from their experience working in the Daily Financial Group. They all have had experience working directly with their enterprise clients in banking and software before actually launching ICON. But the team working on ICON today is now more decentralized and spans multiple countries like Vietnam and the US. What this tells us is that the original team set up ICON with strong fundamentals behind it and then decentralized their power. But what are the original team doing now? Well, they continue to run the ICON Foundation and ICON Loop, overseeing that the ecosystem is growing without actually influencing it too much themselves. They're all working on their own projects, and for example, Min Kim is looking to work into tokenized real estate. Jong Hup, Kyunjun, and Kyun Jae continue their work on ICON Loop in South Korea. And keeping in theme with decentralization, ICON has a number of features which make it easier for new developers to contribute to the network. First off, the CPF is obviously enticing for anyone, let alone developers. Budding developers who are looking for a place to express their ideas can simply build a solid proposal, win votes, and receive monthly funding for it. Secondly, ICON has a flexible fee system for dApps. Unlike many other dApps which charge in crypto, ICON dApp developers have the choice of charging in fiat. This opens their dApps to a wider audience who don't give a crap about crypto or don't want to buy crypto. And in terms of coding languages, ICON 2.0 is built in Golang, but developers can use Python, JavaScript, and Java, which are the most popular programming languages. And with the newest project ICE, an EVM-compatible sidechain of ICON, this opens the floodgates for Ethereum developers seeking refuge from high fees and low scalability to build on the ICON ecosystem. ICON smart contracts can also be updated iteratively. This is easier compared to normal smart contracts where it is mandatory to move to a new contract address for each new update. Their fast sync feature also means new nodes can get up and running faster without synchronizing all of the historical blockchain data. All development is also open source, and developers can get up and running very easily. The project also has a consistently active GitHub. This is very healthy to see. Minimum hardware requirements to run a node seem to be on the higher end though. Obviously, the harder it is to run a node, the fewer nodes there will be, and the less diverse selection of P-reps ICX holders can vote for. This is a tricky one to comment on. You don't want running nodes to be too profitable, as it would attract profit-seeking individuals. Now, there's nothing wrong with trying to make gains, but with Icon, the whole incentive system is shifted away from running nodes to running projects in the CPF. Ideally, there should be a balance just enough to attract newer, better PREPs. So as you can see, Icon is a project with many different parts. It was born with a strong foundation in fundamentals that actually solves a real problem for enterprise, and has a clear advantage in decentralized identity with backing from the South Korean government, real-life usage by their enterprise partnerships, and also operates in an environment with favorable consumer behavior. It is also the only interoperability solution in the East Asia region, and its interoperability solution itself is among the top-tier solutions, as well as being easier to implement than most solutions, and differentiated by being a more trustless option. It has a unique consensus mechanism and multi-channel tech architecture that gives it horizontal scalability, with a core dev team that shows experience in upgrading its core protocol successfully. It has an economic system which promotes decentralization and long-term growth, and attracts new developers and investors through its self-funding through contribution, and arbitrage opportunities through BTP. It has a strong community that has stuck with the project through lack of official announcements, and the community itself takes an active part in governance. It's actually one of the more decentralized projects I have personally come across. Now, let me go through some of its risks. It is still not 100% clear if it can actually scale globally. It might be enough for South Korea and MyID, but we can't really tell at this point. We need more metrics, although the core dev team seems to be very capable. Decentralization is a double-edged sword. In the long term, it will win out, but in the short term, progress can be seen as scattered and slow-moving. Its interoperability solution is pretty solid, probably within the top 3 at the moment. The only thing that remains unclear are migration ability and legacy system interoperability. ICX is not used in the private version of Icon, which is unfortunate, but it makes sense for their enterprise clients. MyID seems to be solid for South Korea, but there is a lot of uncertainty if this can actually go global. There is a lack of developers working on the project. It needs to attract more developers to the network, which its latest upgrades, BDP, ICE, and the governance mechanisms seem like they do. But it is still very early days, and only time will tell if they can get more developers to adopt Icon. Because of this, Icon faces stiff competition from other projects with a larger DeFi and dApp ecosystem. Now, before I give it a rating, let me say this project is really hard to judge. I actually really like the community and the whole theme of contribution, and honestly I want them to do well, especially with the whole MyID alliance and good fundamental backdrop in South Korea. However, I'll look at this objectively and split my rating into short-term, mid-term, and long-term. For people who are looking for an upswing in the next 6 to 9 months, Icon is definitely an A+ project. Its Icon 2.0 upgrade should be released within the next 3 months, and it is a massive upgrade. Min Kim has also mentioned that they were hiring more marketing people, so expect a lot more announcements from them. Also, I expect that many announcements and initiatives from the enterprise side were put on hold until the upgrade is completed. Combined with the bull market we are in, I suspect it will be an explosive couple of months for Icon. Now, for the midterm, which for me is personally 3 to 5 years, Icon has a lot of work to do. Even with the favorable environment in South Korea, it's gonna take time for enterprise to fully adopt decentralized identity. It's not 100% clear how it's progressing. I wish I could visit Icon Loop and ask them how they're doing. If we set South Korea aside, we have the DeFi projects and dApps being built on Icon. These are going against stiff competition, even with interoperability on their side. It's not 100% clear if developers will adopt Icon, and they need to make more of an effort marketing benefits to developers. Honestly though, I think if they just focus purely on interoperability and decentralized ID and took the Asia region, it would make more sense. But who am I to say really? I don't have the full picture and it's my best guess. Until we get confirmation that adoption by developers is happening, for me personally it is a B- rating for the midterm. Now for the long term, which for me is at least 10 years, Icon is an A- rating. By this time, enterprise and governments in South Korea should be using a mature, MyID solution. This means solid demand generated on the Icon network for at least another 40 years. And ICX at this point could be seen as a reliable store of value and should be able to withstand market crashes pretty well. The reason being, using your identity pretty much happens at a fixed and predictable rate every year. And with regards to global MyID, it's hard to see this happening even after 10 years. Reason being, other governments will probably opt in to using their own home-built system. Perhaps ICX can be used to bridge them though, who knows. Their original catchline was hyperconnect the world. Maybe they did get it right from the very beginning. So that's it guys, that's the end of the video. If you liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe. I want to say a special thanks to Andrew from Rhizome and also Nym from the Icon community. You guys were really helpful when I was trying to find research for this project. And yeah, if you all are looking for more information and updates on Icon, you should definitely give a follow to Iconist and also Iconographer. Those are two really good resources. And yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.